So your retirement plans at work, right? You're 25-year-old coming out of college. You go for orientation. You get bombarded with all this sign up here, sign up there, and one of those things I'm sure you would have come across is trying to set money aside for your future, right? And I think as a 25-year-old, I think you probably should pay a little bit more attention to that because the sooner you get to do that and sign up for that, the easier it it does get for that eventuality when you will have to rely on your savings to live on when you're not working, right? So there were two broad categories of plans: defined benefit plans and defined contribution plans. Defined benefit plans don't exist anymore because those were the pension systems of the past. The employers don't want to shoulder the risk of managing an employee's retirement future, and that sort of makes sense, right? Because it's not their core business. Why should they get into this business of managing risk for their employees? Plus, it doesn't make sense because gone are the days where folks used to stick around with one employer from their start to the finish, right? So they would typically change employees a lot often than before, right? So so define contribution plan. So you have three broad categories depending upon who you work for, but they are exactly the same plans. So you have a 401k if you work for a private employer, okay. You have something called a 403b if you work for state, university, teachers, and so, right? Slash teachers. I think even nurses have this kind of plan, okay? Healthcare professionals, okay? Let's take that. So we went too far ahead, okay? And there you have something called 457, which is typically a federal employee plan, okay? So in all three plans, the limit typically is 19,500, okay? Actually, it's not typical. That is the limit for 2020 tax year, okay? Okay. You see, I write very well, so okay. So 19,500 for 2020 tax year, right? You can do two types of contributions from this. Okay, you can either do pre-tax, okay, or a Roth contribution. Okay. Pre-tax, you know what it means. The money goes in. Pre-tax. Roth is where the money goes in after tax, but in pre-tax case, the money grows in pre-tax. It grows tax-free, but when you take the money out, when you are actually retired, you will have to pay tax on whatever the amount is in your plan, right? Roth, the money goes in after tax, but once the money is in there, it grows tax-free and it can be taken out tax-free, okay? So let's run through an example, okay? So let's say you are someone who is making $100,000. Okay, that's a lot of money. So it's not fair to sort of assume that everyone is making this kind of money. But let's to make it simple, let's assume it's $100,000. Okay, let's say in the pre-tax case, you do $10,000 of 401k contribution. Okay, when I say 401k, it's 403b, 457. Okay. Here you don't do any contribution pre-tax, okay, so zero, okay. Then you're in assuming that you're in the 25% tax bracket, okay. You have some taxes taken out of the remaining amount, which is $90,000, okay. You see that's a comma, so that's 9, so $90,000, okay. And here you are going to pay tax on the entire amount, right? So 0.25 times 100k. Okay, again, okay, on the entire amount, right? and that typically will leave you here. Okay, oops. And let's do if $10,000 of Roth contribution here, right? Okay, and that would typically leave you with $65,000 here, okay, and $67,500 here, okay. And it makes sense, right? Because you are paying, you're doing pre-tax contributions, so you're not paying that tax now, right? Here you're doing after-tax contributions in the Roth case, right? So you are basically getting less money in hand. But do you have less money in hand, right? You don't, right? Because here, in this case, everything is going to grow tax free, right? This entire amount is going to grow tax free, and this is what you have to live on, right? In this case, you have this money to live on, but this amount which you contributed, right, is going to grow tax deferred, but it's a pre-tax money, so you have to pay tax later on, right? And why would you want? So there are some situations where you are better off doing this versus that, okay, and I'll sort of run through that one quick time, okay. These are the tax brackets you typically will deal with, right? So this is the 2020 tax year tax bracket, and as you can see, we have a federal tax which is progressive, right? And it sort of makes sense. So the less money you make, the less taxes you pay, because I guess it's just fair. I think it's a fairer system. Okay, let's put it that way. But so if you are trying to look at it from the perspective of what the long-term tax rates are going to look like, right? And if you're trying to make decisions on, I think there are certain rules of thumbs you can sort of use to sort of decide between what you want to contribute to when, right? So let's say you are, and that rule of thumb is, if you're making less than $100,000, okay, let's create another section, okay, very messy, but hey, I hope the point gets across, okay. So if you're making less than, say, $100,000, okay, Roth is the way to go, okay. Roth 401k is the way to go, okay. Between, say, 100 and 150k, okay, it's a toss, okay, it's a toss, but I would still lean a little bit Roth heavy, right? You can split it halfway, 50-50, right? That would be okay. But more than 150k, you would want to do pre-tax, because unless you sock up so much money, you sock away so much money that you have such a huge retirement plan balance towards the later part of your years, working years, that you might actually end up being in a higher tax bracket, right? That's normally not the case. So let's keep these three general guidelines, right? So more than 150k, you want to do pre-tax, less than 100k Roth, and anything in between is sort of a toss, right? Now, so these are the three plans, but sometimes, okay, there are some plans where you have a pre-tax option, you have a Roth 401k option, okay, and then there is something called after tax, okay, 401k, okay. What is this? Okay, so this and this total is 19,500, okay, regardless of how you do it, okay. But the actual 401k limit, okay, is $57,000, okay. So you can technically contribute up to $57,000. This is the thing we talked about, 19,500, okay. The gap between these two amount is 37,500, okay. That includes your employer match, okay. So let's go back to that, okay. Okay, so that includes your employer match. So this is 19,500. Okay, and what is left? What is left between that? 37,500. Okay, and this is 37,500. Okay. Okay. Let's say 5K out of that is your employer match. Okay. Let's say your employer is generous enough to do $5,000 worth of contributions. Okay, on your behalf. That typically goes in as pre-tax. Okay, but that money gets taken out of this bucket. Okay, so now your after-tax contribution is only 32,500. Okay, not 37,500, because 5K your employer is contributing. So your total limit is $57,000. $19,500 comes in from your pocket if you're able to do it. $5,000 is, say, your employer match, which always goes into, it's not typically, it always goes into pre-tax. Okay, that takes away money from the after-tax contributions you can make. So 32,500 is the only amount remaining which you can do as an after-tax contribution, right? Now, it's not, I would say only 10% of the plans typically offer this feature, okay, this feature, and you will likely not see that in your 401k. But if you do see that, you might want to find out whether you have something called Roth Conversion. Okay, do they allow you to convert to Roth 401k within your plan? Do they allow you to take this after-tax contribution because you're contributing more money to your 401k? Do they allow you to do this Roth conversion? If they allow you to do it, that's the best of everything, right? So before you do anything outside, before you contribute anything outside, before you buy any random stock outside in a brokerage account, if you have this feature, and if there is a Roth conversion feature available from your after-tax 401k to Roth 401k, you want to do it almost always, right? So you don't want to sort of give up on that, especially considering the fact that the money goes in to a Roth type of account, and the feature of a Roth type of account is that once the money gets in there, the money grows tax-free and can be taken out tax-free. So this could be a huge deal, right? Now, we are basically talking about this thing for 1%ers, right? So, or top 5% of the income. So who does $57,000 type of contributions? That's not a typical employee, right? So that's why it's not being offered as much, right? I think we hear that in more in the Silicon Valley type of professions, right? But you will not see that being offered in the rest of the country, because doing this $19,500 itself is a stretch, right? And if you think that everyone is maxing out their 401k, you don't know how bad the situation is with respect to retirement planning, right? So I guess a majority of the folks are not even coming close to doing this thing, right? So forget about this part. So that's why employers don't offer it, because it's a feature which is not designed for normal folks, right? So, but if you are privileged enough to have access to that, and if you can do whatever you can to make this after-tax contribution, you want to do it, right? So that's all. That's all there is to it about 401ks or 403bs or 457s, right? I could have written this up, but the problem is that these numbers keep on changing, the rules keep on changing. So when the time comes, I will redo it. Okay.